The panelists can join us up front. Can you just please join me in applauding this guy for making this movie and this extraordinary woman? Thank you so much, all of you, for coming and for staying with us this whole weekend as we explore these issues that, as Debbie said at the end, just can't make us tired. We're gonna see lots of stuff this weekend. We're gonna hopefully feel really energized. And I feel particularly energized by this film. So just to reintroduce our panel, our director, Adam Zucker, Dr. Debbie Almontaser, the founder and CEO of Bridging Cultures Group, and Daphne Eviatar, who is from Amnesty International's USA Director of Security with Human Rights Programs. So Adam, let's start with you. Tell us about your background and how did you get from there to here? What made you want to do this project?
Well, first, I do want to thank everyone here at the JCC. I'm really happy to have my film shown here in this context, and Isaac and Cheryl and Allison and Karima and everyone has been really so welcoming and supportive, so thank you very much. The answer to how a documentary filmmaker and editor, a Jewish American, came to make this film is actually pretty simple. It's 2 words: Donald Trump. And I don't go looking for films. The great documentary filmmaker D.A. Pennebaker said, don't look away, when he was asked, how do you decide what to make a film of next? And I try to follow that as a mantra. And throughout 2016, I was very, very upset, as many other people were, throughout the entire election cycle, at the things that were being said, the things that were being acceptably said, which were just kind of shocking to me on a daily basis. And then when the election happened, like many people I know, I was really devastated, and I didn't know what to do. And I felt particularly aware as a member of a religious minority and a particular affinity to what was going on to another religious minority in this country. I just could not fathom that that was being allowed to take place. And a couple of days later, after the election, I was just trying to speak to as many people as I could, and a friend invited me to a Muslim Jewish sharing circle at Judson Church that Lab Shul was organizing. And we were all talking about our feelings, and someone from the Muslim community got up and was talking about the terrible things that were happening in her community already, about women on the street with hijab who were being harassed, about people in Arab American communities who were having people, writing graffiti on the walls, this is Trump country now, you're gonna have to leave. And that was Debbie Almontaser who was saying this. And I just kind of realized at that moment that I had to do something. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't I'm going to make my next feature documentary. I just knew I had to try to do something. And at the same time, I realized that here I am, a native, lifelong New Yorker. I lived here my entire life. And I certainly known Muslim individuals, but I didn't know any Muslims, really. I mean, I dealt with them. There was no one on my phone. There was no one to call up. And I was embarrassed by that. And I realized I needed to go out and meet my neighbors. And I also knew that the Muslim American community did not need me to come in and tell their story. They did not need me to come in and save them. I kind of needed to do it for myself. I needed to have some way of telling a story that would I would say, give me something to do. That sounds rather pathetic. It's not that. It was just some way to funnel my energies and what was going on, and to actually do something constructive. And I imagined that many people would be telling this story, however you encapsulate what this story is. And I just wanted to add my voice to a conversation that I hoped we'd all be having.
And can you tell us a little bit about your process? You knew no Muslims. Was it hard to get into those communities? Did people say, like, who are you and what are you doing here? Or was it, thank God you're here to tell our story, or something in between?
Definitely something in between, but closer to the latter. Out of the whole filmmaking process, seriously, my favorite part is the beginning, is just calling people up and saying, can I come out, and can we have tea, and can we talk, and just listening to people without having to worry about what am I going to do with this, or where is it going to go, or is this the right person to put into a movie, is just listening and hearing things and asking questions. And I don't think I'm really good at getting people to talk, but it's actually, it's A, my job, and B, I tell people, I'm a filmmaker. They don't realize that it's just me, and it is just me. I have no team. I don't have a crew. I'm just coming out there on my own. So it's a wonderful process, and it's organic. Person A tells me, oh, you should talk to person B. When I first contacted Dr. Debbie, she recommended some people, and I just listened to a lot of people, and some very impactful people don't end up in the movie, but really kind of helped inform what I might possibly be interested in following. And, it's actually a wonderful time to visit your local mosque. I mean that. Even more so in early 2017, when I think people were generally, many people told me this within the Muslim American community, that it was sort of their responsibility, and it's unfortunate it had to be, but they felt like they needed to get people to know them better. So if any respectful person came by and wanted to, people took a lot of time with me, whether in the mosque or in the neighborhood, the community. So it's easy, I find, to get people to sit down and have a drink and talk with me. It's not always easy to, and actually most people are, okay, yes, you can film, but the way I make movies, I never say, can I come film with you today, and then can I come back next week, and I come back the week after that, and the week after that, and because that answer is no, so I just don't bring it up. I just kind of get my foot in the door, and there was a little bit less embedding with this project than with some of my other films, where it really was going on for a long, long time, but I keep on showing up. Half of life is showing up. It's true. Just keep on showing up, so that at a certain point they say, this guy, if he's going to do something bad, he would have done it so long ago that he must be legit.
So Debbie, what'd you think of this guy who showed up at your door and said, I assume you said, I want to make a movie, not, I just like to know you, right? So what'd you think, Debbie?
Well, first, let me thank all of the organizers for putting this together. And I really want to say to the entire audience that there is no place that I'd rather be tonight, especially in the face of the rise of anti-Semitism and the attacks that have happened across the country. So I am here with you in solidarity and let you know that I and other American Muslims across the city and across the country stand with you. And a crime against one person is a crime against all of us. And so really stand with you. So what did I think of Adam? When I got the call from Adam, I was like, oh, okay, here we go again, another filmmaker. What does he want? What's this all about? Finally, I met with him, and I made it very clear to him that I wasn't interested. And he's like, okay, can you just help me? I said, sure, I'll be happy to introduce you to a whole bunch of people that I think you should speak to. And so he literally was showing up to a lot of stuff, and not necessarily because he wanted to just specifically focus on me, but he's like, any event that's happening in the community, I'd like to. And then I got suckered in to actually having a sit-down interview. And he's like, you're just going to be, it's a small thing that you're going to do. You have to give me context, and you have a lot of background. And I was like, okay, I'll do this interview with you. But I want to say that Adam just grew on me and a lot of members of the community, because his intentions were very pure, and he was very sincere. And you can really, like, I've never told this to Adam, but I saw it in his eyes, like, what was happening to my community really impacted him emotionally, and he really felt like he wanted to do something. And that's, I think, I truly believe that all of the people in the film felt this sense of responsibility to let him into their lives. One community in particular is a Bangladeshi community that he focused on in Ozone Park. One of the things that didn't come up in the documentary was, I'm sure some of you may have heard several years ago about the imam and the assistant imam in Ozone Park who were, shot dead in broad daylight, execution style, by someone who just was sitting in a car and saw the imam and his assistant after leaving the mosque walking and shot them from the back. And they died instantly. And that was a hate crime. So that community was really struck with tragedy. They lost 2 of their spiritual leaders and went through a lot. And they were in the media a lot. And, it was traumatic. But for Adam to come in and actually show the resiliency in this community was really powerful.
Yeah, in another movie that we're going to see on Monday, Brian Stevens talks about getting proximate, and it does sound a lot like, Adam, the strength of you probably not coming in with a full crew, but you looking, actually caring, made a huge difference in the success of this film. Daphne, I want to get to you and a little bit about your work, and I would love you to talk, particularly in light of the ban, where Amnesty International is at this point, and perhaps share a little bit your reflections on the film.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks. So, Amnesty, well, first I just want to say thank you also for letting me participate in this. When I heard that Adam was making this film, I was like, I want to see this and I want to share this with people, because Amnesty International has worked on the Muslim ban. We opposed the Muslim ban. We had members out on the streets opposing it. We had online actions and petitions. But this does something that we can't do. And that's what I really love about this film and why I wanted to support it in some way. And we're saying to Adam, like, how can we do more screenings? Because it really moves you. It really brings you into this community that many of us don't know. I was raised Jewish. I lived in New York City a long time. I know some Muslims, but not very well. I don't know the community very well. I know that a lot of people have a lot of Jews in particular, not in particular, but a lot of just New Yorkers or Americans outside of New York in particular don't have a lot of interaction with Muslims and don't know much about the Muslim faith. And so when you hear about a Muslim ban, like, I guess it sounds bad, but maybe it's not really about you, right? I mean, that's the way I think a lot of Americans think about it. And with Donald Trump as the president, well, he likes to emphasize that people are other. And so they are other people and they are terrorist people. And if you don't really know Muslims, then how are you going to know any better? And I think what's so important about this film is you can't turn away from it when you watch these people. And I was getting teary-eyed, and I've seen it before, but I hadn't seen it on the big screen. And it was just like, it's incredibly moving, and you realize we are all the same at some very basic level, whether it's Jewish or Muslim or Christian or whatever, it all doesn't really matter. And I really, really appreciate that. And I think so. Just back to what Amnesty does, we do petitions. We have an online petition right now asking people to write to their congressperson to support the repeal the Muslim ban. We are unfortunately expecting an expanded Muslim ban to come down. There's a lot of talk about there being an expansion of the ban issued on January 27th, which is the 3-year anniversary of the Muslim ban. And so there's a lot of concern that the Trump administration is going to expand it to another 7 countries, which is really devastating. And, with this administration, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, it does. And so we will oppose it. We will encourage other people to oppose it. We will have online actions, and we have members around the country. And I encourage all of you to get involved locally or however you want to get involved to oppose it. But again, as Debbie said in the movie, we need a new administration, really. So this year is really important to that, to changing the future administration, to changing Congress, to urging Congress to do what it can to repeal the ban. So that's where Amnesty is. I mean, we'll keep doing activism, but I really want to get the film to more of our members and to more people out in the country, just so they can kind of connect to this whole issue in a more kind of connect to it by heart, in a sense. It's by heart and soul, in a way. It's not just like a legal issue or a discrimination issue. It's really offensive at a very core level. And so I really appreciate being part of this.
I do have to ask you this question, Debbie, because I think, Adam, if you were filming a Jewish prayer service, we'd still be here. But it appears as though your prayer services are quite short, and I must say I was quite jealous of it. Is that really true, or did you cut it off?
Adam did a great job in actually doing a seamless edit that you couldn't tell, only if you were Muslim.
I see. Okay. I understand. But let us go there a little bit to talk about the Muslim-Jewish relationship, and I'm interested, Debbie, not only in what we saw in the film, but what we didn't see in the film, and are we showing up for one another, and is that something that you're feeling, and what is it that we need to do for one another that we're not yet doing?
Well, oh, good, it's working. I thought it wasn't working for a second. I think that after the presidential election, oh, here we go. Okay. After the presidential election, I feel that there was this surge of energy where we were actually really showing up and standing up and making our voices heard. And as I mentioned in the documentary, we as a nation, went through this exhaustion of showing up. And I've seen over the course of the last several years that when something paramount happened, we all came together. And we're now, again, in those moments that we really need to step it up. And, as much as we are saying that we need a change in administration, we don't have to worry about it in New York. Right? Because we know that New York always votes Democrat. But what we really need to do is show up for the swing states. We need to show up in Pennsylvania. We need to show up in Michigan. We need to show up in Virginia. We need to show up in Florida and really make an impact in those states. And I think there is nothing more powerful than having Muslims and Jews, with arms locked, going to these states and saying, this is for the survival of our communities. Because as much as Trump tries to make himself be the great savior of the Jewish community by legislation that he's passed, and he is weaponizing this community. He does not care about this community. And we've seen it. I've seen that interview that he did at an organization where he was saying to them, all of these derogatory, things, and, you're going to vote for me because you don't want, lose your money. And I'm like, it just made my skin crawl. And it just made my heart hurt so badly that he can stand in front of an audience and say such horrible things and think that it's funny and that he could get away with it. We cannot let him get away with it. And in fact, what he's done is created more divisiveness between Muslims and Jews by some of the positions that he's taken, and we cannot fall for it as a nation. We cannot fall for it because he really does not care about either community. He has an agenda that does not include us, and it doesn't include people of color and immigrants.
So, Daphne, actually, for all of you, before we throw this out to the audience, where do you see hope right now?
She gets the easy questions.
I actually do see hope. I see hope every time I go to a demonstration. I was at a demonstration last weekend in front of the White House. That one of the things that I focus on U.S. national security policy, and one of the issues that I still focus on is Guantanamo Bay. So there are 40 Muslim men locked up in Guantanamo Bay indefinitely, most of whom have never been charged with any sort of crime or any wrongdoing at all, and some have been there for over 15 years. So we go out there once a year on the anniversary of the opening of the prison, and we protest. And I was so just moved by how many people showed up and came from across the country, some of whom do hunger strikes every year to protest these people who they've never met, they don't know. Most of these people are not Muslim. The people who protest, and that's what I am hopeful about. I'm hopeful about all the people you see in this film who come together. I'm hopeful about the communities that come together and support each other. And these sort of cross-community connections, I think it's just great. I mean, one of the things Amnesty really wants to do is connect more to religious organizations and interfaith groups, because there's so many, we have such common values. All the different faith groups and community groups, there's such common values here, and people really do want to do something. Kind of like what Adam said, like so many people feel compelled to do something. Most people are not great filmmakers, so that's not what they can do, but they can do something. And so I'm encouraged by that. I'm encouraged by seeing people want to do something, and the challenge is really getting people together to do things that are meaningful. And I think we can. I mean, look, we already started to change Congress. I should clarify, I work for a 501c3. We're non-political. However,
Same.
I just want to say that the policies that we support are, it's really important to see people coming out for those policies. And I'm very encouraged that people are.
Well, I don't work for a 501c3, and I can say whatever I want. And, usually when I'm in these rooms and people say, what can you do? And I say, well, it's really important to vote. And I know most everyone in this room is going to vote. And as Dr. Debbie says, our votes don't matter a whole lot in New York, and that's very, very unfortunate. But what you can do, it is not that far to get to Pennsylvania. And spend a day in Pennsylvania registering voters. Go to Philadelphia, go to the city, and there's a lot of campaigns that will be doing this, and once we have a candidate, there will be people, it will be orchestrated through that campaign. But before there's a campaign, there's still many people and organizations working on voter registration. Go to Philadelphia or any city in Pennsylvania. Spend a day doing that. It's more valuable than a $500 check to the campaign. If you can, go to Michigan and Wisconsin. Go, put it out there. I mean, one of the things I'm doing with the film that has come up recently is going to Michigan and Wisconsin to tie into voter registration rights drives within the Muslim American community, which is a community which is a little underrepresented in the voting logs traditionally. A lot of immigrants who've become citizens. And so go to these places. If I can invoke, we're at the JCC. It's commemorating MLK, and it's Shabbat. So if I can invoke Rabbi Heschel, pray with your feet, which is something he said at Selma when he went there in support of Martin Luther King. He said, I'm praying with my feet. So that's what I think we need to do.
Yeah, and I would add to that if you can't travel, pick up the phone and let your fingers do the walking and call a relative in any of the swing states and convince them how important it is to make the right choice this time around. In addition to that, for those of you who are local, there is, we are going to be kicking off census. We need to make sure that every person in New York City is counted so we do not lose any congressional seats. The city, university, as well as the city council has allocated millions of dollars that has been given to nonprofit organizations to make sure that all ethnic groups are counted in the census. So if you're interested, a couple of organizations that are underrepresented are, for example, the Bangladeshi community. There are organizations there. An organization that I helped co-found, the Yemeni American Merchants Association, which was actually birthed out of the Muslim ban. I don't know how many of you saw the bodega strike where 1,000 bodegas closed in 2017 and 6,000 people ascended to Brooklyn Borough Hall. I was one of the lead organizers in that, and out of that came this organization that right now is mobilizing and organizing Yemeni Americans. And we received $100,000 to count Yemeni Americans in the Bronx and Brooklyn and other parts of the country, other parts of the city. How many of you have a bodega on the corner of your block? Raise your hand. All right, tell them they got to complete the census. So those are important things. And if you want to make donations, there are organizations that are doing, Muslim ban and immigration, family separation, leading initiatives that you can actually support that way as well.
So I'll answer my own question before I take some questions from the audience. I found hope actually from the guy who runs that Muslim community center. It looked very familiar to JCCs of the last century, helping immigrant Jews acculturate to America and supporting those families one family at a time. And I find hope among the three of you. You're really like, in Jewish tradition, we call you Lamed Vavniks. You are really among the 36 righteous people, I believe. So with that,
Thank you.
do we have time for questions?
Few questions.
Few questions.
Few questions. We were just going to ask that you do this respectfully, and we're actually going to have, if you want some hope, we're going to have two of our youth volunteers handing the mic around, and they've been instructed to take the microphone away from you if you go on for too long. So please, over to you.
Okay.
Charlie's going to get...
Hey, Charlie.
First of all, thank you very much for coming in, for hosting, and for showing the film. I'd like to talk about something that you briefly mentioned. I believe there was one of the imams who was saying that Judaism and Islam have a lot in common. And you even just mentioned now, that there was a question even in our own ancestors' lives about you come to another country and not just what do you do, but what should you do, right? So the question for us, even today, how can our culture and our traditions, this was also mentioned in the beginning of the movie, how can our culture and traditions survive in an open society that values integration? And many people would say, well, we shouldn't think about integration as the objective. Maybe we need some kind of segregation or some kind of insularity. Otherwise, there'll be no reason. Our grandchildren will see no reason to continue the faith or the traditions at all. And I'm not sure if you're seeing that in your work. There might be people who say, well, you come to another country, you have to respect the lifestyle and the laws and the traditions, and you should adapt to the situation where you live. There are others who say, I'm going to do what I feel is natural, regardless of where I am, and the people who are in those countries have to tolerate me being there. So what have you seen to be?
Yeah, I mean, there's a larger question about this American project, right? We come here and we want to hold on to our culture, we want to hold on to our language, and we want to know one another. And to what extent is that project in question right now, I guess, is part of that question?
I'm happy to answer and say to you that the American project has been successful. If you are able to be true to yourself, your faith, and where you come from, and are proud of your heritage, your custom, your religion, you can be that person that is both American and Muslim, American and Jewish, American and Irish, American and Catholic, any faith tradition. And as I was listening to your question, it made me think about the research that I did for my PhD, where I looked at American Muslims in public education and their leadership and whether or not they're able to be who they are in the public sphere. And sadly, because of the aftermath of September 11th and the backlash and discrimination, I'm the first to study this group of people, and I had to look at other communities to see what life was like for them. And as I read research and history books and what have you on Catholics and Jews when they first migrated to the United States, it was heartbreaking. It's what my community right now is experiencing, and in some cases, even far worse. And so the reason I bring this up is that we have to look at the history of our communities and find the commonalities and make sure that that history doesn't get repeated again. And creating a pluralistic society where we all matter and that we can show up in our true, authentic selves and be able to work and bring peace and solidarity to one another.
Thank you. Any other questions? Charlie?
Yes, my question probably to Adam. And as far as I understand, you chose about 5 characters, but obviously you had more characters, which kind of you have to sift, you have to narrow down because they simply other characters probably wasn't for your film. They could refuse whatever. So maybe you could tell about other characters who whatever reasons declined, or maybe you just found them not filmable in your film. Also, for example, you didn't mention 2 important events in New York history. I mean, the construction of this mosque near September 11, which it was in 2010. I think 2009, there was a big controversy. Another was a school, charter school with Arabic language in Brooklyn.
Okay. We have someone who could speak to that a little better than I can.
Yeah. So what was left on the cutting block?
Well, there's always a
Or who, I think, is really the question.
You know, I make films about people, and when I say that, that's the only thing that really interests me as a storyteller. I mean, and more than that, I think that's what audiences connect with. So it's not a question ever of finding who are the 5 best people. And I would say even, I don't want to make films about, the paraplegic who cures cancer, which is amazing, but I sort of am attracted to normal people. So I don't know what example there was.
Debbie, do you think you're normal? I love that.
I don't think I'm normal at all, but I'm glad I'm not normal because then I wouldn't, do all these interesting things that I would actually make headlines.
But we
I
know
don't like making films out of saints. I like to make people out of human beings. So I'll use one example. There's a woman whose name I don't want to name who was in high school when I met her. Palestinian American, was a real organizer in the schools, and because Dr. Debbie, I would say not from her interest, kind of forced her way into the story just because I kept on filming events at which you were central, it made sense to make something of that. But because you were a veteran activist before this started, I was interested in somebody who was kind of learning as we speak. And this 17-year-old girl kind of fit that description. And it's not like I was looking for her, but once I found her, I was attracted to that. And I was filming, and it was hard. It was hard because her family was a little bit more protective, and her father didn't like me. And I don't mean that personally. I don't think he trusted me, and I that's fine. I get that. And so that's a story that didn't work. But I don't know. It's not like I picked the 5 perfect people, but you go out every day in filming, and a lot of great things happen. And I just have a hunch of what kind of things could be an element of a story and which things aren't. And I'm afraid it's failing me right now, the great stuff on the cutting floor, but it's never, I don't like DVD extras. That stuff doesn't interest me. it earns its way into the story if it helps move the story forward and if it really helps us to get to understand who it is. And I rarely regret, so I'll give you one. Now, since I vamped, I can come up with something. Imam Shamsi Ali, who is a world figure and speaks all over the world. And his mission, if you will, is to kind of open people's eyes that Islam is not only an Arab phenomenon, but it's worldwide, and more Arabs live in the Far East, be it Pakistan, Indonesia, and Malaysia than in other places in the world. And Shamsi has bought a property through his foundation in Connecticut, in Moodus, Connecticut. And I went up there, and it had been this summer camp, and Shamsi it was during Ramadan, and he invited all the local people in Connecticut, and it's pretty to have the iftar, and everybody has interfaith iftars, and most people there had never seen a Muslim or had never been to a Ramadan event, and it was outside, it was the summertime, and it was really lovely, and it was beautiful, and it was really well shot, so I really wanted to use it. But it just had to go. It was too far outside of the purview of the story and the framing that was going on here. And once I cut it out, I mean, I put it in, but once I removed it, I never regretted it. But it was great material.
Sorry?
Sir, I'm sorry. Sir?
Yeah.
We have a next question over here.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you all. I really appreciated
Or
hearing
another.
from you this evening. And I have one last question for the night. What I heard you all saying is that it's so important for us to break down barriers and to get proximate with one another. And I'm really curious what advice you have for those of us in this room who we don't have connections with others in the Muslim community. How can we begin to do that?
Okay, so how many of you have children in school? Public schools. Raise your hand if you have children that are in public schools. Okay, 1 in every 6 children is actually Muslim in the New York City public school system. There's got to be a Muslim child in your child's classroom. Start by meeting their parent. That's one. Number 2, I talked about the bodegas, right, in your local neighborhood. Go to your local bodega and introduce yourself and ask them where they're from and how glad they're there. Take that opportunity to have that conversation. Muslims do laundry. The laundromat is a good place to have a conversation. There are plenty of opportunities, and I think events like this and the opportunity for the Muslim Community Network, which I am on the board of, and JCC in the past have collaborated. We need to do more of those kinds of collaborations and create those opportunities for our communities to come together. But on the basic level, the 3 things that I just gave you, the laundromat, your child's school, and your local bodega is a good start.
And there is a mosque right here on 72nd Street and Riverside Drive, and we go there. Sadly, when there's a terrible crisis, we can also go there when there's not. And we do need to applaud Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum and CBST for simply showing up. I want to thank you all for showing up. You will likely receive emails from us in the coming days that will give you very specific opportunities to get involved. This isn't one of those film festivals where we're hoping you had a good time. We are, but we're going to ask that you get involved. And you met my colleague, Cheryl Parker, who directs the Joseph Stern Center for Social Responsibility, and Yitzi Zablocki, who is the director of the Carol Zabar Center for Film, and they have put this entire weekend together. We want to give them a round of applause. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
And tomorrow we have a full day of programs starting at 2 p.m. Please join us and help spread the word. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daphne. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Hi, how are you?